Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Molly Quinn, an actor and producer you might have seen on several seasons of Castle, or in the movies Welcome to Happiness, Dr. Sleep, several others. She pops up in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and you can hear her as a voice performer in the various Winx Club shows. And, of course, she was Penley Stalwark in my beloved Thrilling Adventure Hour. Her latest project, Mickey Reece's Agnes, which Molly produced and in which she co-stars, is in theaters and on VOD this Friday after a run through the festival circuit, and it's really good. You should check it out. Molly picked Song of the Sea, the second feature from the Irish animation house Cartoon Saloon following the exquisite debut The Secret of Kells. It's a masterful tale of a kid named Ben, voiced by David Rowell, whose grandmother moves him and his little sister Saoirse from their seaside home and their lighthouse keeper father to live with her in Dublin. In no time at all, Ben and Saoirse are heading back to the seaside, their journey complicated both by their youth and by the possibility that Saoirse is half Selkie, destined to save the fairy world from an existential threat Ben didn't even know existed when they started out. It sounds complicated, but it's all pretty simple, and it's utterly beautiful. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I remember the first time I watched it, I had bought I was looking for like independent animated films to show my nieces and nephews. And that came up, and I had seen Secret of Kells, which can be a bit harder to digest. I think for kids, it's a slower moving animated film. And when I watched Song of the Sea, my jaw dropped to the floor because, like you said, with Thrilling Adventure Hour, like it felt like it was made for me. And I rewatched it last night, and just it's exactly that. I feel like it's how I see the world and how I wish other people saw the world too.
Oh, that's beautifully put. The Cartoon Saloon thing, the aesthetic, their vibe, I don't know how to describe it other than it the instant you see it, that this is one of their works. And Song of the Sea has this tender, delicate, beautiful elegance to it where you're watching perfect circles move and they happen to also be people. It's the visual aesthetic is so striking. And yeah, you'd seen Kells. I think Kells had played here at the Toronto Irish Film Festival, and then Song of the Sea was at TIFF, the actual film festival. They got it for the Toronto Film Festival and played it as a TIFF Kids feature. But it just felt like a leveling up in so many ways, that they were just doing a little bit more, being a little more ambitious, working like Tomm were working the music in the way he does, and taking a really simple folk tale and just sort of recombining the elements into something that's so sad and universal and moving. This time through, of course, I'm more worried about the dog than anything else.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know how it's going to end, so yeah. I'm fine with it. But yeah, the fact that dog has a personality to rival
Koo.
any of the human characters. Yeah, Koo is just so lovely. And
he's great. It makes, I think what I really loved was just, first off, sharing a perspective from another part of the world, sharing these folk stories that are so much more interesting than I feel like all the Grimm's stories that Disney took and has remade 100 times, right? Mm-hmm. It gives you something different in a very like loving way, because even the second time, like I watch it and I'm very aware that like it's a culture that I want to be a part of, but these weren't my stories. I didn't grow up in Ireland. Like I'd heard the word Selkie before, but it's not something that I'd ever been told as a kid or anything like that. It was more of a self-discovery when I started getting into lore and stuff from around the world. And so I love that. And it's part of why I want to be there so badly. And I wonder, this time when I was watching it, like, I wonder if even the story of the Selkie came up as a way to discuss absent mothers or mothers that die during childbirth. I really laser focused on that. And I think it's what I loved the first time I saw it, but wasn't able to articulate it yet, which is that my obsession is mother-child dynamics and what happens when there's a missing parent. You know, the last scene in Song of the Sea, when that boy, because he's still a child, and he goes up to his mom and he asks her to stay, and she puts her hand on his cheek. I was a waterfall of tears, a waterfall of tears. And I want to know how they do that. I want to know how they get, you know, the colorscape so perfect, and the voice casting so perfect, and the story, and there are so many different stories that they weave into the movie too. You know, like, you think you're following this mute girl, and you get these fantastic elements, but you wonder if she even wonders if it was all a dream, you know, because as kids, we all have those dreams where we thought we were flying. Mm-hmm. And you don't tell anyone, but you in your head, you know, you can kind of believe that, yeah, I flew last night. You know what I mean? So you wonder, oh, I swam with seals last night, you know? And then the little boy, when they moved to the city, just wanting to get back to Koo, you know, and wanting to get back, I think in a larger sense to family. You know, he's attached to that dog because it's all he has. You know, it is the thing that's been close once his, you know, dad kind of got into his own world because of grief. And then I wonder too if it's an expression of grief, and how that is a winding road before you can come back to the family that is left, you know, and appreciate and love and nurture your new family. Because I think that's really hard and a long process.
I agree. And I think I did notice a bunch of reviews. I went back and read some of to see how it was received. And a lot of people they sort of, not complaining exactly, but a lot of the reviews said it's sort of sloppy in the second act and circuitous, and it's a very long road. And it is, but it needs to be. Right?
They can all get out of here. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's because I think the journey, because if you're really, you know, the way I look at it, and I do see it as a roadmap to dealing with loss and trying to knit something back together, that is messy. Mm-hmm. You know, like, sure, you want a perfect story, but I to be honest, I don't want perfect stories. Those aren't real. I tune out. I'm really not interested.
I just think we need to see that Ben is lost, both metaphorically and literally, that he needs Saoirse to read the map a couple of times and help. And he needs guidance. He is a child. And this time through too, I hadn't remembered that Koo is just a puppy when Rona leaves, when Rona disappears from the storyline. And so he and Ben grew up together. Of course, they're equally important to each other. And again, Koo is just a great big round thing with, you know, sometimes you see his eyes and that's about it. But the expressiveness that they pack in through the animation into this dog, and the voice that the barking actor, whatever it is, it sounded like it was real, but there's some scary noises that I rather, you know, came from a person pretending to be a dog. Yeah. He's just he's so vividly part of that story. And Ben responds to, like, we have to understand in the first 10 minutes why it's ripping Ben apart, that he's losing Koo more than his father. And Koo's charged down the first time I saw it, I remember thinking, oh, please don't go in the water. Please don't. Like, if this story opens with the dog dying, trying to save his, that's the giant tragedy that they need to get past. I'm leaving. I just can't. But it's too sympathetic to do that. The filmmakers care too much. Like, they know it's bad enough that we've lost a mother. Yeah. And that, you know, ultimately we will lose her again. Yeah. We have to let the kids find their way back to each other and the family. And that's that second act where, yeah, there's a detour and Ben loses everybody for a little while in the underworld. He needs
he's almost
that,
becoming,
right?
Well, and it's funny because he's a child, but in those moments, like when he meets the spirit who has all the hair and can show him the stories of life, you know, it's almost like the first time, because this happens, you know, for every kid. It happened for you, it happened for me, when you gain some perspective on the world that is not you focused. You know, when you become aware that there are other things much more important than you, quite frankly, going on. and that is a step in growing up.
Yeah. My parents divorced when I was 10, and it took at least another 15 years for me to realize just, how hard they were trying anyway, how like none of it mattered. Right. But at the time, because it was all about me and my world coming apart and being destabilized, but you either learn from that or you never do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I had an absolutely disastrous relationship in my mid-20s. It's just like, oh, I get it now. Like they didn't know any more than this. I didn't have kids, so it was easier. But it's just that moment where you step outside, you finally understand that there is a world outside yourself. And
and sometimes no matter how hard you try, it doesn't work. And that doesn't mean that you did not try.
Yeah. It's okay for relationships to end. Or fail even, but it's just how we keep going and how we learn. And you mentioned the texture of the dream, and I wanted to get back to that because the sharpest thing about the film is that both of the adult figures voice characters in the fantasy realm as well. Brendan Gleeson is doing Connor and MacLear, and Fiona O'Flanagan is Granny and Maka, and both of which are kind of the same person. So it is entirely possible this whole thing is simply the projection. I mean, it's how for years, 2 or 3 years anyway, I was telling people and screwing with them by arguing that it's possible Guardians of the Galaxy, because of the way it opens, the whole film could be taking place inside that kid's head as he runs from the trauma. And it was a year after this. So clearly that's where I got it from. But it's such a simple metric to use as a story to build this world around a child who doesn't want to be in it and will come up with literally anything to get himself out. So of course his annoying kid sister is magic, because in a weird way that means she'll never stop annoying him, because if it's supernatural, he has no power over it and he can just ride along. And the visual device of him clipping a dog's leash onto his little sister, who is again expressive as all hell despite having almost no dialogue in the entire film, just the things they do with ink. It's just it's amazingly confident storytelling. They know they can do this. They can rest all of this action on this tiny little character who says almost nothing, sighs a lot to communicate sadness, and occasionally becomes a seal, because that's just the realm we're in. And none of it is ever questioned. There's no incredulity. People don't say, no, that's not possible. Everyone just rolls with whatever's happening. And it's such a lovely touch.
Yes, I really enjoy that, and like you said, it all could be a dream. It all could be, still being a child and trying to make sense of the world and being in a fantasy. Because even there's the shot when he has his hand-drawn map and he's gonna go back to Ku, and the little girl comes with him. And they start to see some of the little pixies, those little shimmers of light, but it's leading in the big city to just this flower that's coming through the pavement. And this time watching it, I was like, oh yeah, because that is the magic, having something green, in this new foreign city landscape. Because I think, even as adults, we feel a sense of relief when we go to a park or anything like that. At least living in Los Angeles, it's very heartwarming when you start to see a break in the concrete jungle and see something natural and beautiful, because there is something more beautiful in the natural world than anything we can create. I feel like art or filmmaking, like it's almost, it's like it's an homage to what we see. You're trying to capture how you see the world or what you find beautiful in it, because we want to share that. We want to share that beauty, and I think the way they do it in Song of the Sea is just so perfect. Their use of watercolors to show like the murkiness and the undefined swirls of emotions just in the sky. It hits the nail perfectly. It's just like, yes, this is what it feels like to be unsure and melancholy and angry, and almost not letting joy in. I think by the end, part of acceptance is also allowing yourself to be happy, to not feel bad about what you have left. I think when we grieve, there can be a sense of betrayal if we're not just sad the entire time, because you want people to know that you still remember. But that's not healthy, and it's not. You can't keep it up for too long, because then life passes you by. And I don't think the people that we love, that we no longer have, if they know anything at all, if they have any consciousness, would want us to live our life that way.
Yeah. It's something that the Cartoon Saloon films seem to understand really well too. They've all got shattered relationships somewhere in there.
The mother is always gone.
Yeah, that's true. All three, right?
It was really difficult for me to choose between Wolfwalkers and Song of the Sea, because they hit me in the same spot from different angles.
Yeah. With one, you can talk about all three. They're
right.
They're gateway drugs to each other, and Wolfwalkers sort of amplifies the things that Song of the Sea amplified from Kells. Some of the designs are a little similar,
but you have a girl who's a little older and dealing with it's the same in Song of the Sea. You have a father,
Robin and Mabe,
who's wanting to protect his children. But it's interesting, right? Because even when he throws her coat in the box into the sea, and he throws the key away, like he tries to make it so impossible because he's going to hold on to her because he needs her. And that's not how you should think about your kids.
Yeah.
It's not how you should think about your partners.
Yeah. It's also the absolute wrong thing to do, story-wise, which we later find out, which is also great, because on second viewing, it was just one of those things where you realize, oh, he doesn't know. Like he doesn't know. He didn't know his wife. He doesn't know his kids, and he doesn't know who or what they are. And it's an extension of all of that. His grief has kept him from finding out what he's dealing with.
And he's functioning from fear. Mm-hmm. He's only functioning from fear, and that he didn't handle the first loss well, and he couldn't control it, but he can control this. But that it's never good. It's never a good idea to try to control someone else, because it's not going to make you happy ultimately either, because eventually you're going to wonder, well, would they have stayed? All those others, what ifs come up because you didn't let things be organic. You didn't let nature take its course. Yeah. And he almost kills his daughter. His daughter almost dies because of it.
Yeah. And it's here that I'm going to just take a second and praise what Brendan Gleeson does as a voice actor, because those moments of vulnerability and complexity and confusion are not the things he's known for as an actor. I mean, I love the man to pieces, but he is a great big Irish burly fellow who plays full-bodied, emotionally aware and active characters, but they're almost always moving quickly and confident, or wrestling with something. And here he just turns that all off and lets the fear come out in his voice. Mm-hmm. That moment where he yells at Ben to stop resisting, and then immediately stops. Like his voice clips back in a way that mirrors what the animation is doing when the character pulls his hand back, but without the shock that we hear in his voice at his own behavior. I don't think that moment would land at all. It would just be a very simple act one bit, and instead it colors the rest of the film.
Yes. It's he's fully committed in the booth.
I mean, you've done voice work. It's a different mode of acting, right? It's so completely different.
It is, but what I think makes Cartoon Saloon's work so much better, quite frankly, than a lot of other animation or voiceover work for that matter, is, you always get this line at the end of voiceover auditions that's like, we're looking for natural voices. And they don't ever want it. They just don't. They don't ever actually want a natural voice. But Cartoon Saloon does, like his voice, and I think that what they understand is that by allowing Brendan to act, Mr. Gleeson, I guess I should say, by allowing him to actually act, you do get all of that in his vocal strain, and you feel the emotion because he's not going over the top. He's not being told to push it higher. You know what I mean? Like he's allowed, at least, this is what I would hope to see if I was there when they were making it.
Sure.
And what it feels like, which is, it feels like great acting that you're just seeing an animated, slideshow too. Like the medium is animation, but it is very much a serious film to me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like I agree with you quite a bit about Mr. Gleason's work. But one thing I always think about him, I was young when The Village came out, and I haven't rewatched it since.
Right.
At the time, I loved it, and I'll never forget him because the movie opens with him at the gravesite of his son.
Yeah.
And how broken and lost, and how truly he's communicating to this patch of dirt. And so I can't, like, that's how I always see him. And I always know that when he's in something, he's going to deliver that. He's going to be like, I don't know how that man has any energy left, because it's so depleting to give of yourself that emotionally every time across all these different mediums. Just bravo. Thank you. Please keep doing it forever.
Yeah. Oh no, I have I've never actually interviewed him, but I met him at TIFF one year in a hallway. We just walked past each other, and I just said, I have to tell you how much I love your work. And he said, thanks, that's great. And grand. He said, that's grand. Shook my hand, and he's one of those people with just this massive pause. My hand disappeared when he shook it, and it's just like, oh, that is actually the characters that I get that. You are an incredible performer, but you could probably just show up and be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you seen Cavalry?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I think it might be his best work.
Okay.
It's a phenomenal performance. He plays a priest who's told that he's going to be killed. It's his passion. His passion play. He walks around and tries to figure out who wants to kill him and why, and what's going on. And it's phenomenal. It's Calvary, released in 2014. It is John Michael McDonough. Yes, I know stuff. But it's great. Chris O'Dowd is in it, and Dylan Moran and Kelly Riley. It's just this odyssey film that takes place in a tiny little window of time in a tiny little place in Ireland, and it's great.
Calvary. Cool. I'll check it out. I can't wait.
Yeah, and again, to see him in stuff like the Harry Potter movies and in cartoonish performances is to just still see the depth that he finds, right? The way he can make those things come to life.
Yeah. Harry Potter got so lucky with the actors they had in those very important roles. Mad-Eye Moody, Snape, like Professor McGonagall, like the luck that they had at having those just unbelievably talented actors is, thank God those were the childhood films that I got. You know what I mean? Because like even watching like Twilight, let's say, like as a teen, when all my friends were like very excited about it, like sure, I got the hot stuff, but they're never things I go back and rewatch. Like I saw the first one because my friends liked it. I rewatch Harry Potter, even if I'm just looking up scenes on YouTube, and I'm like, I really want to see that scene when we get the flashback with Lily and Snape. Like I do that. And that's because of them. It's because they had the foresight to hire incredible people. And those incredible people, they showed up and they were incredible.
There's a scene in, I think it's in Prisoner of Azkaban, where it's David Thewlis, Gary Oldman, and Timothy Spall in a room. It's one of the few times that Spall shows up instead of the rat. And it's the 80s, 90s, and zeros of Mike Leigh. Those are his leading men. And they're in this children's film, and they're still giving real heartfelt performances. And it's those movies are going to be, or they probably already are, this insane gateway for kids to discover like all of British cinema over the last 50 years.
Absolutely.
We've got Maggie Smith and Michael Gambon, and like I think basically everyone but Helen Mirren.
Gary Oldman, it's I completely agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I'm just lucky. I just feel very lucky that those are the ones that I got.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like my generation didn't get those. I guess the closest we had were, Alec Guinness showing up in Star Wars and Francois Truffaut in Close Encounters. They're incredible bodies of work are behind them, but it's not. Those films aren't about them in the way that the Harry Potter films are about the adults sometimes.
True.
Yeah, and it's a complexity and a level of storytelling, which I'm going to swing it right back to Cartoon Saloon, which is rooted in a certain kind of Britishness. And then Cartoon Saloon finds the Irish stuff, the Gaelic stuff, and brings it out and uses it and weaves its own mythology. The story of the Selkie, which I only know about because of John Sayles' Secret of Rowan Inish from the 90s, I think, 1993, 1994.
Yeah.
It's live action, and the most vivid story is told by a person speaking to camera. And it's a little monologue about the relationship that led to the birth of the little girl who's the principal figure in the film. And for 10 years until I saw the movie again, I was sure I'd seen it. I'd seen that flashback, but it's just a person telling a story.
Wow.
It's John Sayles.
Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible just about spoken word and how we can feel like we saw it when we just heard it. The way our senses work, I think, is it's pretty incredible, especially when a story is captivating.
Yeah. And in the stories that are told, we hear, they're metaphors. It's like people are always trying to explain biblical stuff by saying, no, it's a metaphor. It's a moral story. It's about how to behave in these things, not what actually happened, which means those fables and metaphors can be wrapped into almost anything. And so here we have the story of a child who lost his mother and doesn't understand the world that he's living in, brought by force from a tiny place into a big world that he doesn't like, and immediately fleeing. And because it takes place on Halloween, which is a little throwaway detail that never stops paying off, right? Like it makes the whole thing magical because he's surrounded by little demons and little ghouls and devils. And the fairy folk that are bothering him are just indistinguishable from kids on a bus. I love that shot of the two of them. They get on a bus. They're sitting in the back, surrounded by kids in costumes who have, because they're all wearing masks, they have no expressions on their face. And it just, it felt like Spirited Away. It felt like My Neighbor Totoro. It's this tip into Miyazaki, and you realize just how flexible all these fables are because cultures trade them almost, or you can communicate the moment that you feel so exquisitely perfectly in a Japanese film into an Irish animated film that clearly they've seen those movies and they're working at something, but it's still its own story. They exist separately but together, and it's just so wonderful.
Yes, and let me give you another take on it, because I think all those shots that you get, it's another way to show that they're not like other kids. They're dealing with something. They don't get to just be carefree and have a pretend day where they run around and eat candy like kids deserve to have. Like they don't get to have that. Like he's on a mission. He wants to go back home. And at this point in the story, home is Ku, that's where he wants to go. And again, it's that loss of innocence. It's that I didn't get to have this, like you, and those things, there's no way around it. Like they're sad, but it's just life progressing and the individual journey that we're on with these two young people, as they are learning what is most important to them and realizing, because they show how mean he is to his little sister. After he felt like he was going to be the best big brother, and then tragedy strikes and he can't help but see that little baby as his mom is gone because of this baby. And all his hatred is put on to this little girl. And it's not fair, but it's a very human thing to do. And he learns as he's growing up that was wrong. And that if anything, this is the only representation of his mom that he actually has. And sure, it's unfair and he should have had his mom and he should be able to have a normal Halloween. But sometimes we have to grow up fast and we have to take on more responsibilities. And I'm really proud of him. I think he kind of figures it out a lot quicker than than a lot of kids do. He's only like a 10-year-old boy, but he's taking on responsibility. He, I think, does become a great big brother to his little sister, and appreciates her for her oddness, for her otherness.
Yeah. And he is, by the end of the film, he is, spoilers for Song of the Sea, I think we've already kind of covered it.
Come on. 2014, this movie's been out.
It's had a window. People had that chance. But he is able to let his mother go, even as he loses her again, which this time just, I could feel the scraping at my heart as it's being torn out this time, because I know how it's going to go. It's the thing that I suspect a lot of, you mentioned it in contrast to Disney, the way the story is told here, Disney would never allow that. No. It's just not allowed. You can't have kids crying as they leave the theater. That's just not fair. It's not good for repeat business.
Yeah.
But the honesty of it, right?
Yeah. Well, and let me tell you this, right? So
please.
As a child who grew up on Little Mermaid and all those things, when I first saw Little Mermaid, and I must have been 6, however young I was, I came out of seeing it and was angry as I've ever been. I did not understand why she got everything in the end. She had been disobedient for no good reason. Like, she had been a brat. She had been a complete brat, and she gets it all. And she doesn't have to deal really with any repercussion. And I was so mad, and I was talking to my parents, and I was like, this isn't accurate. It's not accurate. Get me the book. I was like,
Jesus, the book.
And they wouldn't give it to me.
No kidding.
And I
know how it ends.
And I talked to my grandfather, and I was like, I need this book. You got to give me this book. And he didn't look, my grandfather didn't give a shit about me. So he gave me the book. And thank God he did. When I finished that book, I said, yes, this is how this story is supposed to end. This is what happens. And it's sad. It really sucks. But this is right. Like, I honest to God felt at peace knowing how that there was a moral, like knowing that there was an actual, and forget moral, there was an
a price to be paid, right?
Stakes, and there was a price to be paid. Because, she's still like, it's still all unfair. She's still just a teenager who gets tricked and is being impulsive. And I think being impulsive is a really good thing when you're a teen, but still, just knowing that there were consequences and that there was a full story. So Cartoon Saloon and the movies they make are exactly what I need. Like, there is some part of my brain that needs to follow a story to its actual conclusion. Because I think when you, and I think this is where it's kind of unfortunate with the retelling of these stories to be so completely positive, is you're robbing kids of a full emotional life. You know?
You're telling them everything's going to be okay no matter what, and the trials they go through are the things that don't really matter, right? Because you just have to get through them, and at the end everything will be fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
and
all three.
And brush it off. Just brush it off. And it's like, sometimes things stay with you, and it's a little messy, and you can still persevere. But what's the point of persevering if you forget everything that you went through? Why go on a journey? It's like when you do anything, like my fiance and I, we got lost on a hike not long ago, super lost. I was very scared. We ran out of water. It's in the desert.
Oh, geez.
It was terrible. We're all cut up and scraped. And finally, after like 3 hours, we look up and we see these 2 dots in the distance, and it's people, and they start yelling at us. They're like, you're not on the path. Like, you got off the path, go back and you'll find it. And so we did. We went back and we found it, and everything was fine. But, the story that I tell from that is like, we were scared, and like, we grew closer together, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't focus on the end. Like, guess what the end is? Yeah, we made it. We're fine. I'm still alive. That's not fun. What's fun is what we actually went through, and why we should never go hiking again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just think about all the ways there are to die in the woods, and I don't go hunting. I walk the dog. That's perfectly fine. That's my
Good for
thing.
you. Yes, that's good.
Yeah, but it's true. All three of these films end on high notes that are earned with suffering, with endurance, like with there's a bittersweetness. This, I think, most of all of the three, because Wolfwalkers, the tragedies have already happened by the time the story starts, and it's just about rediscovering joy, which is just wonderful.
But you still have the father who almost dies.
Yeah, at a cost.
You still have that, and because she's a little older, you can tell that she's wondering, even though it's my nature, was I doing the right thing? Because someone I love who just doesn't know me yet, because I think he is a good dad. He wants to protect her, doesn't exactly understand. But they're both, like I said, because she's, like 13, 14, and you already have a bit of that awareness, and she's already been through tragedy. She wants him to be okay. So again, you're right. Like, it's just,
they have to earn it. They have to come back to each other.
They have to earn it. And I love that, because it's such a better lesson to learn.
Oh yeah, I agree. I was going to ask you if you knew, because as it happens, just purely coincidentally, we're going to release this episode on Tuesday, the 7th. And on the following week, I think, Shout Factory is releasing all 3 Cartoon Saloon films in a special box, like holiday Blu-ray edition. So,
oh my gosh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just happening. I'll put a plug in at the end for people who might need it. But there's a 4th disc of extras and commentary tracks and behind the scenes featurettes. And I can't wait to just know more, to understand more. When Wolfwalkers came out last year, Apple put out some featurettes about the making of, but I just want to live in those production lines. I want to see how they create the visuals and what they do that's digital versus what they do that's hand-drawn, because the synthesis of those two medium in this particular storytelling mode is just so spellbinding. I mean, Wolfwalkers looks like tapestries, and the that they've been inspired by are just magical. And I want to know what sources they pulled from here, because half the stuff looks like woodcuts that have come to life.
Yes, I was thinking that. Yeah, there was a very, my experience with woodcuts is like from my Catholic background, like seeing, and I felt the exact same way watching it this time. I was like, oh my gosh, like there's such a medieval woodcut vibe to parts of this film. Yeah, I can't wait to watch those extras.
Yeah, it's going to be great. The easy plug for Shout Factory. I've known these people for over 2 decades now, and they, even before they were what they are now, and they are just the best. Nice. Cannot wait to see what they do with this stuff. They saved The Dead Zone from obscurity, nice. Put that out this year, and M. Butterfly. I mean, as a Canadian and specifically a Toronto film critic, I'm on their side for their Cronenberg work alone, but the stuff they've done with kids projects, I mean, they're the ones releasing a lot of the Studio Ghibli films as well. And they just have the best people for this stuff. So yeah, I'm dying to put in that 4th disc and see what else comes up. Plus the movies will be remastered, and that'll just look nice. Can't wait.
Sign me up. And I hope all my friends appreciate the box set that I give them, because that's what everyone's getting.
That's a pretty good gift.
I think so.
Yeah. And you mentioned your Catholic upbringing, and that gets us in a really weird way to Agnes.
Yeah.
Not even a weird way, kind of a straight line, which is the most Catholic film I've seen this year. Without being.
Thank you. Yeah, the most anti-religion but most Catholic film of 2021. So Catholicism is a great way into, and with Song of the Sea, I realized rewatching it that another thing that ties in is my obsession with mother-child dynamics.
You mentioned that earlier, yeah. So the way I usually close the podcast is by asking, what, if anything, of this film the guest has used in their own work. But I'm still trying to see if there is a link. The missing mother, missing child thing is around in Agnes. I don't want to spoil that film, but it's certainly an element of the second half of the movie in a much greater way, I think, than people might think.
And thank you. And I think the more people know about films, the more interested they are to see them. So I'm very happy to say that in the second part of the film, you realize that what Mary has been protecting and trying to kind of contemplate with her time in the convent, where she has to flee from because people won't leave her alone, is the loss of her son, Joey. And you just see it like very quickly. And we left it that way so that anyone who has experienced loss can put their own story on it. Because to me, Agnes is we draw you in with kind of the comforting convent, and you know what a possession film is, and so you're in for it, and then we take you just on a car crash of a different direction. And I want you to feel jumbled up. I want you to feel confused when we go into the next part, the next phase of the film, because what we're trying to meditate on is the aftershocks of grief and how poisoning it can be to not let something go. And so at the end of Song of the Sea, where you see the mom's come back and she wants to take her daughter with her, and the daughter decides to stay. I think that if Mary had been in that position and could come back and could bring her son back from the dead, she would never let him go again. She will hold on to him forever, because she's basically wanting to almost like petrify herself in the memory of the time she had with Joey. And without him, she is just a wounded animal who is freaking out at anyone who comes near her, because she really just wants to be left alone. But the thing about life is that it doesn't leave you alone. Yeah. And there are things that come up. It doesn't matter how deep in grief you are, or how upset you are. There are things that come up that snap you out of it. There's the job and the boss who won't leave you alone. There's trying to fill that void with false love and sex, which is probably the thing that drives Mary the most crazy, as you see when you watch the movie. Yeah. And then there's what I would call false prophets. These people who say they want to help. They say that their entire life is about helping, the priests of the world, or in the world of our film. But they don't actually want to help. They just want it to be over. And they want to prescribe the advice that is just their boilerplate, that has nothing to do with the individual. And that is really damaging. When I was, there was a time I lost a friend, and she passed away. And it was tragic. It was awful. And everyone kept saying everything happens for a reason. God has a plan. And it made me so angry.
Yeah, I have the same response.
It was immediate. Like it was at the funeral. It was immediately that people were saying it. And I'm like, first off, your timing, like what the hell? And this is not the plan. That doesn't, again, it's like the Little Mermaid. It doesn't make me feel better. I shouldn't feel better right now. I should be sad. This is the time to be sad. And I think at the time, if I had had someone that was actually able to listen or willing to ask me a question, no one asked me how I was feeling. They just prescribed everything happens for a reason. I think I would have come to terms with the loss faster and possibly healthier, because this was more than 10 years ago. This is really the culmination of Agnes was my experience not being listened to and carrying this grief, because people are saying to bury it, but that's not enough. Yeah. I need to talk about it. I need to know that someone else cares. And then I can start to let go a little bit. And so that's exactly what Agnes is. And I hope that when people watch the film, whatever they're dealing with, I hope they give themselves some grace, or even better yet, recognize that maybe there's someone in their life that they should call or meet up with and say, like, I'm here to listen. Like, let me help by just listening. But that's my great, aspiration, I guess, for the film.
Yeah. Well, once I realized what it was doing and what it was really about, and that it is, I love genre stuff, always have, but no movie ever gets into the what happens next question, which is the most fascinating thing to me, because we all know, I had a conversation about this, weirdly enough, a couple of weeks ago with Gil Kennan, the co-writer of Ghostbusters Afterlife. In a weird, it's just such a strange thing, but the thing that bugs me the most about that movie is that all I want from any Ghostbusters sequel at this point is, what does the world look like when you know ghosts are real? You have seen them. Like, there's in the movie, it shows, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but Paul Rudd pulls up a YouTube clip of the original movie and just shows people there, look, ghosts. And what would that do to the world? It's touched on in the first film and then never again, not in Ghostbusters 2, not in the spinoff, or the reboot, not in this. And Agnes is that movie. Like, this is a person who has been through the metaphysical ringer. She has proof that this stuff is happening. And so, of course, if she has a horrific, grievous personal loss in her past, all you'd think about is, how do I get it? How do I use what I know to get back to this, to be where I think I need to be? And that is, again, we're talking in metaphors. That is the perfect metaphor for loss, because
thank you.
You would do anything to have another day with the people that you miss the most, I think. And it translates into the film in such a really simple. Mickey Reece as a writer director is doing something that I don't think anybody else wants to do as a filmmaker. And that sounds negative, but I think he's exploring this space that for drama, Climate of the Hunter, that sort of thing. These are movies that aren't conventional, but they're telling conventional stories in new ways. And I think I can see why other people don't want to try it. And I could see why, Ghostbusters Afterlife doesn't really want to examine what the knowledge of the afterlife is, but Agnes finds the answer, or at least the theory.
Thank you. And I think, another thing, and this is, it's funny because making independent films is really difficult, but it's also, you're kind of lucky if you can make one, because you don't have the pressures the big studio films have on them. You know what I mean? To be like mass appeal. You can experiment and try to tell a story that we've all seen from a slightly different angle. That's what it gives you. You have the time to experiment. So that's, why I love indie films and I love making them. And real quick, just another tie into Song of the Sea, I'm realizing is when Maka is bottling all of her emotions because they're all too much to feel. What better animated sequence to describe Agnes and describe what Mary is going through. She has, bottled all of her happiness, and she thinks if she holds on to it really, really tight, that she'll get to have it. But by doing that, you are separating yourself from the world and the positive beauty that can come from real healing.
Yeah, the possibility of more anything, right? Even if it's more pain. But it could just be peace. Or balance.
And it's better. And it's better. You gotta, I think, Ben Hall's character says you have to walk through the darkness to get to the light, and that's just the truth.
Yeah, that's what Cartoon Saloon's movies are all about. All three.
Exactly. And I hope Agnes expresses that half as well as Cartoon Saloon does.
Yeah. Well, when the kids that watch these movies are old enough to watch Agnes, they'll see the link.
Oh, I hope so.
We'll make them see it.
Great. I love that.
My thanks to Molly Quinn, whose new film Agnes is in theaters and on demand this Friday, December 10th. She's really great in it. You should see it. Thanks also to Jamie Lobel. She knows what she did. You can find Molly on Twitter at MollyQuinn93, MollyQuinn93, and you can find Song of the Sea on Blu-ray in Shout Factory's Cartoon Saloon Irish Folklore Trilogy, which does indeed come out next Tuesday. The film is also available to rent or buy on VOD platforms everywhere. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I host the Now What podcast every Friday, in addition to writing a great deal of words about movies and television. This week, we've actually covered the year in television. You can find that at nowtoronto.com/movies and on the Now What podcast, where we talked about it. And you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're there. Watch movies, stay safe, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next time.